Why are upgrades so expensive? Stay tuned. The Handyman Pros are going to discuss factors related to upgrades and expense. Welcome to the Handyman Pros radio show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation. This edition is entitled, Wow, that's a lot more than I thought. To help me explain, I've got my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what has been going on this week?
Well, greetings.
And salutations.
I am here. Well, Larry, what's been going on this week? That's a good one. One of the things is, and we were talking about this before the show, is that I was out at a prospect, let's say, and they want me to do a big to-do list, which that's a lot of things that we do, right? One thing after another. And after looking at what has to be done, the expense adds up.
Right.
Okay. Right. And they want to do upgrades, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But there's certain factors in some of these upgrades that need to be considered. And some of the things, and we've talked about this before, planning and kind of thinking ahead and visualizing what you want. There's a lot of things that can take place, and it gets expensive.
Yes, it does.
So you just have to be aware of that. And I think today's show, we just want to talk to everybody about some of the experiences that we've had as of late and over the past couple of years or whatever. But also, kind of just when you're when you're thinking about doing things, just kind of look at the whole thing of what you're trying to do and understand that it can get expensive for some of these upgrades. Yeah,
and I just want to add on that while everybody thinks, the contractors make a ton of money and stuff, it's just there's always hidden things. Things cost what they cost largely for reasons that most people don't really understand, so you don't really, when you think about, if you go out and you buy something at the store, say you buy food, right, and you walk in and you say, man, the cost of this coffee is really, really expensive, but very few people actually think about what does it take to get that coffee to the store, right? What is involved, and what's the supply chain, what's the distribution chain, all that kind of stuff. But we have the same thing in the contracting business. It's like you get into stuff and people just say, I don't understand why it's so expensive, or they go, man, that's expensive, and so that's and this is what you and I were talking about. This is why we're doing this show. We just want people to have a little bit of an understanding about what goes on and what sort of things. So, John, you were talk to us about this project you're working on with this big to-do list. Talk about some of the different things in that to-do list that the customer was kind of a little shocked about.
Sure. So let me first start off by saying some things are pretty straightforward. And to set this thing up is that, hanging a fan or in an existing fan or changing a fan over. Okay,
there's one already there,
and you're just going to do, or it's just a light on an 8-foot or 9-foot ceiling, and you're just changing out that light with another one. Pretty straightforward. But what they wanted to do is things like in their kitchen. They have probably a 12-foot ceiling in their kitchen, and they have an island in the kitchen, and they have these 3 hanging lights that are over the island. And the lady would like to change out those 3 lights with 2. So when I asked about, she wants to put the other 2 lights on, the first hole and the third hole, and then so you got the second one, if this is making sense. You got the second one that's got one in the middle is going to be blank. So it was, what would you like to do here? I mean, you can just put a cover on it, which I don't know if that's really what you want to do. It's up to you.
So set the stage. This was a very, very expensive house, right?
Yeah, this is probably $1 million house,
right?
And so having a plug that's sitting up in the ceiling is probably not, but that's their option. Or now it gets a little bit more expensive to remove that and drywall it, fix it, and go through that whole process. Which means paint the whole thing, So these are kind of things. And then there was another one that was kind of adjacent, another light that was adjacent that wasn't quite centered over their table, as a big dining room table that they had, and they wanted to move it over maybe 6 inches. Well, it's not just that easy to move a light over. I mean, you have to drill another hole and move the whole box over, and then you've got the hole there again. So these are a lot of considerations, and it takes a lot of time to do that. So, when I started to look at this, it was like, they kind of got to thinking that they really weren't, when I was asking about that, I could see that they hadn't thought through the whole thing of what this entailed.
Right. And as we're so far, at least I'm very fond of saying, is we can basically do anything. It just depends how big your checkbook is, right? I mean, what do you want to do? We can do it. It just is going to be, it can be cost prohibitive, right? And so one of our tenets is it's saving time, money, and aggravation, right? And it's just like that 6-inch light move. I mean, that's probably, if you think about it, and you know this from doing construction and stuff, that thing is probably attached to a joist, right? So now you're going from a joist to a non-joist, so you have to support the light, particularly if it's a heavy light, or if you're putting a fan, if you were going to, for whatever reason, wanted to put a fan or a heavy chandelier in. Now you've got even a bigger project, right? For what seems so simple to go 6 inches, right, John?
Yeah, right. And so there was, and this is just looking at it. I haven't assessed it. And you're right. It's probably, I'm sure that light, the box up there is attached to the joist, and the contractors actually did the right job, and they did actually hang the light in the middle of the room. Okay,
right. But the
way the room is with the door in the side, and the way she's got the table, she wants, it's not centered over the table. Okay, now you can move the table, right? But then it kind of
you can't open the door.
Then it kind
of
blocks the door a little bit, So, I think that the cheaper thing is to get a smaller table. but it's kind of funny, and it's whatever you'd like to do. But this is the kind of thing that I was bringing up, is that if we're going to move that, there's really no easy way to do that, other than drywall, to do it the right way. So, yeah. And
you're going to hear drywall over and over, folks, because almost everything involved in doing anything, if you're really going to move anything, involves drywall work. It's just really that simple, right? And as we always say, drywall work, while it's not difficult, but it is very, very time consuming. I think one of the things that we had talked about, John, we talked about this before we started this show, is that what's the biggest expense in doing any kind of remodel effort, right? Or any kind of upgrade or anything. If you're anything, what is the most expensive part? It's time, right? It's the time. It's how long it takes you to do something. And whether that's your time or hiring somebody, there's still a time component, right? Because if you're like John and I, you just love spending your weekends taking your house apart and putting it back together.
Yeah, right.
But which, folks, that's actually not true. The handyman's house is the house in need of much repair, much the same way the plumber's plumbing always leaks, and so forth and so on. At least at my house, it's that way. John's been busy working on his house, so we can't say the same thing. But anyway, so that's where we wanted to go. I was going to say, I was out in the field this week and I did a disposal job. I was just swapping out somebody's disposal, and it was the same kind of thing. So I sent them a text beforehand and said, they wanted to have a firm time when I was coming, and it was the middle of the day. I was between jobs, so I was sending them a text to let them know. And they texted back, "Is there anything we can do?" And I said, "Yes, actually, if you would clean out under the sink, that would be tremendous, because that on average saves us what, John? About a half an hour?
Oh, yeah.
Not just to clean out under the sink, to get up under the, to get at the plumbing. And then the other thing is I know that when I've done it, it's like, what do I do? What do I do with all these cleaning supplies? Mostly it's cleaning supplies and stuff like that, paper towels and all that stuff. What do you do with it? And these particular people, actually, I get to the job site and they tell me this story, and they go, we're really glad you had us do this in advance. We found stuff we hadn't seen in like 2 years. I was like,
Yeah, get rid of it. Get rid of it.
It's time to get rid of it. Yeah, exactly. So those are that's what the purpose of this show is about. Is talking about things that you're not thinking about, right? So what else do we have, John? What else are we thinking about? Like when somebody's doing a project, what do they need to be thinking about? Just anything, just kind of a stream of consciousness kind of conversation.
Well, I'll give you another example. Is that the job that I was just at, they had to cut the wall board apart in the ceiling. Okay. And this is just something that, you want to consider. You want you want upgrades. You want pot lights in your ceiling where there might not have been any. There's no lights, so there's no electricity up there. Well, our electrician friend went out there and they wound up having to cut a big trench in the ceiling, basically removing the wall board so they could get the wires fed through, because it wasn't, they couldn't access it from the top. It was in the top floor. There was no attic space above it. The room above it had hardwood floor, and that was the only way they could really do it. And so, the homeowner, I think, was a little taken aback by saying, okay, well, if I want to have these nice pot lights in this one room in the front, the electrician said, well, the only way they can really do this, because the way the joists are running and things like that, is we got to just dig out, about 10 feet long of your ceiling, so we can run the wires through and down into the switch, and put in new switches and stuff. So they wound up calling me to fix this whole thing. So I think that's something that you need to consider. And when you say, wow, all this stuff is, expensive, a lot of times, you can be under the impression that these things are fairly easy to put up, some of these things, but they're really not. It takes a lot of time, and complications can happen.
So I have a question for you on that one. You put the drywall up in the ceiling back. You mudded it all up. Did you paint it?
I did not paint it. No. The homeowner's going to paint it.
Okay, so is he painting the whole ceiling? Do you know, or is he just painting?
Yes,
over
he's going to paint. He's going to paint the whole ceiling.
Yeah, because we're big on this, right? I mean, you and I, we've probably talked about it a million times on the show, but I see it. I mean, it's like virtually almost every day, right? You do a repair on a piece of drywall, which the repair is actually it's relatively simple. I mean, you fill it with mud, you sand it off, you do it again, you make it nice and smooth, you make it look good, you put a little primer on it, poof, looks brand new, it looks like the original wall, right? But then there's matching the old paint.
Yeah, and especially on and so this is another consideration, so if it was me and they wanted me to do it, I would have been happy to do that for this gentleman. And I said, it's almost going to be impossible to match a ceiling, especially on a ceiling, okay, because it's the way the sun hits it, and that glance off the way the sun kind of glances off the ceiling. It's very difficult. It's very tricky to match paint for a ceiling. Okay, if you don't already have the old paint.
Even if you have the old paint, it's tough.
Sometimes you can get away with it, but not in this case where it's that big. If it was just a little bit, you could probably do it. But this was basically, you're gonna redo the whole thing. So he was going to wind up, just touching up what I had completed. It wasn't going to take much sanding, and he was going to paint it. So I said, fine. I gave him the tips of how to do it and those kind of things. But it was that consideration of what the complications of doing, putting these pot lights in was going to be. Back to the lady with the hanging lights and things like that. There's things to be thinking about, and that's why it becomes expensive.
Yeah, and particularly if you want it turnkey, as we like to refer to it as turnkey, right? So meaning contractor comes in, when he leaves, it looks just the way you want it, and it's done, right? So I'm a big believer in doing turnkey projects, because I've seen too many people that hire people and it's not turnkey. We've talked about the plumbers that leave holes in the walls, the electrician just in this case, but he had already called you in on a consult beforehand, and he had laid it out that it was going to be more expensive. But trying to get the paint to match. I mean, if it's really, really, really turnkey, it gets expensive because there's a lot of steps to it. And I guess our point is that there's always hidden things that happen. And we've discussed on this show, we've discussed many, many times about wood rot and things like that. And those are, as we call them, voyages into the unknown, right? So you get into a wood rot project, you really don't know what you're doing. It can be as simple as just, digging out the wood rot, replacing the board, or putting some Bondo in and being done with it. Or it can be, as we discussed on a previous show, a complete window frame rebuild. Right, John?
I mean, that was a total mess.
Yeah, it was a complete
mess.
And
it was, not to go back and rehash that one, but it was one of those things where, why are things so expensive? Well, these are the kind of things that happen, right? That you don't take care of things for a long time, and the next thing you know, you're into a major project.
Yeah, I do want to make a comment on that. So yesterday, I actually went to a job site. Right, this is a friend of mine, and I go to his house, and he wanted me to do a consult on looking at some wood rot. And I'm going to use this one because this is a really good example. The house was built in 1994, so that's a 25-year-old house. Now, John, normal experience with a 25-year-old house is?
I live in one.
So and you've maintained your house pretty well, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's still lots of projects.
Oh, well, there's always, yes.
Yep. So I go in and this I've known this guy for a long time, so he's a good friend of mine. And anyway, long story short, I get in the house and he shows me just these 3 little areas of wood rot on his wooden windows, the only 3 wooden windows that he has in the whole house, because when he first built the house, he's like, I want vinyl for everything, which in 1994 was pretty rare, right? I mean, you have to admit, It was pretty rare. But I go into his house. He has maintained this 25-year-old house. I mean, it is. He did a fantastic job of maintenance. And these little places of wood rot, they just kind of got away from him. And actually, I think it had to do with a faulty caulk job, actually. But these 3 little areas, and long story short, they're simple repairs because he's kept up on them.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk all the time about regular maintenance, about regular inspections, and about just take care of stuff when you see it. Get it done early on. This guy's house was a fine example of that. He had maintained that house so well over the years that I didn't see any. John, how we usually say we go in and we find like lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find anything. And in fact, even these little wood rot jobs, he was consulting, should I replace the whole window or not? And I told him, no, just fix it. He can fix it. He can Bondo them up. I mean, they're really not that bad compared to what we've seen. I explained that to him.
And then back to the point of, hey, why are things so expensive?
Because you don't maintain them.
Yeah, you don't maintain it, or in this case, if you're going to replace windows and things like that, it's just not all that easy. I mean, another thing that we've run into before is, hey, I want to just replace my door.
Right.
Yeah, I had a lady. They had a door that they broke, and they wanted it replaced. Well, they threw the old door out, okay, and they wanted, they were going to just go down and buy a slab, what's known as a slab door, and replace it. Well, they wound up not hiring me because I told them it's going to take some time to do this, because Larry, as you know, replacing a door with another door, you got to cut it down, you got to fit it, you got to hang it, that versus a pre-hung door. Right. So you can spend a whole lot of time doing that, and things get very expensive. So simple things like, hey, I just, you don't. It's not one of those things where you just pull the three hinge pins and slide in another door.
Yeah, it's rarely that simple. Rarely.
So everybody out there is just, you just need to be aware of these things. And it really was brought to light the other day when I went out to do, to look at this to-do list that they had. So, it just kept going.
Going and going.
I mean, it was, it's. I don't think they were taken aback by the cost of the fix and things like that. But you could see, and I've seen this now in a number of people, that when I'm either doing drywall repair, even that, hey, the repair is going to look, it's going to have to be big because they're butt joints, and they're going to have to, that hump's going to be spread, the little hump of tape and things have to be spread over bigger. Why is that repair so big? Well, if it's not, you want to see a hump in your ceiling because those drywall is not flat. Okay.
There you go, wanting to do the job right, John.
Yeah.
What's the matter with you?
That's right. I should have just thrown up a bunch of tape and left them. But no, honestly, it's one of those things. But you can tell. I can always tell now when people are like they start to rethink things when you're explaining. And I always try to explain to people what I'm going to do so they can follow me and they understand what it does. The job entails.
Right. And we'd had it's just all of it. It's so much more comprehensive than what I think the average person thinks. And I don't care what repair it is, it's always more comprehensive than what you actually think. There's just always a lot more to it than just this and it looks that 6-inch thing, right? You only want to move it 6 inches. Well, it's so much more involved than just plopping it and moving it over here. It's just crazy. And I want to make a comment on doors. Any doors and windows, anything that you're doing outside, right? So when you think about outside, now all of a sudden you're into siding, right? You're into siding, and that siding stuff is outside stuff is more. What do we want to say, John? Involved? It's not that it's involved. There's a different set of concerns. You have to worry about water intrusion, right?
Sure.
So you have to, you've got the weather, and that's the outer skin. It's kind of like, I don't know, if you cut your skin, you got to sew it back together, right? Well, it's the same thing in a house. You don't want to leave any elements exposed for water intrusion because we talk about it all the time. But it's because we see a lot of it here in Atlanta. But you got to make sure it's solid. Well, if you've got a stucco outside, changing your windows out, that can be a real problem. I mean, it's really can be very, very challenging. And same thing with a door, anything that punctures through the outside of the house. And it just depends on what your house is made of and this and that sort of thing and exactly what you're trying to do. But you've got to be thinking about those things because you'll be shocked. It'll just kill you on that kind of thing. John, we were having our conversation earlier about just going to the big box stores, right? Going to the Home Depots and going to the Lowe's and how long it takes us to just go into the store and buy stuff,
Yeah, so I think that's kind of funny. So if we pivot here from being from the handyman talking to the customer, it's really handyman talking to handyman now, and or contractor. Yeah. Or it's homeowner, if you're going to fix stuff yourself, and that is, here we go again with the amount of the time it takes. Right. And I was kind of thinking about it the other day. Larry, you and I went into to Home Depot to do a job, and it never ceases to amaze me how long it takes to go to everything. So I guess the moral of the story is that if you're thinking that you're going to do things on a Saturday morning at your house and you're going to go over to Home Depot, add in another hour and a half to
easy
or more to go over to Home Depot, unless you live right next to one, which then forget about the drive. But in my case, it's 5 miles to a Home Depot. Then I got to you put all the things together, the parking, the getting in, standing in line, trying to find stuff in Home Depot, and I inevitably, even though I'm in there all the time, I feel like I'm going from one side of that store to the other.
Oh, you're only doing that because you want to get your 10,000 steps. That's what it is.
Exactly. 20,000 just in Home Depot. I feel like I work there, and I'm back and forth, and I'm like, oh man, I forgot that. So I try to be prudent with how I put my list together so I can go up and down and get things and be out, but still, it takes a long time. So, if you're going to do something, and I certainly take this into account now. If I do something on a Saturday and I have to go to Home Depot, I better be there real early, or I'm not getting started until 11 o'clock in the morning.
Real early, isn't that Friday evening?
Yeah, well, that's ideally. That's funny you say that, because ideally is that I try to go over to Home Depot or a big box store, whatever, before I start that project, the day before, because it just eats up so much time.
Oh yeah, and as just on the big box stores, right? So stay away from the prime times when people are really there, because your wait time in line, especially right now under these. So we're in the middle of the COVID thing, or well, actually
Yep.
and it just takes forever. Oh my God, it takes forever.
Yeah.
Just takes forever. Well, anyway, all right, John. We got anything else on this topic? Is there anything else there that we touched on?
No, not really. I think it's just I think it's just the awareness of little projects can turn into bigger projects, and I think it's just everybody needs to think through what these little projects are going to entail, because things that seem simple are not, and it takes a lot of time to do it, and that's just doing the project the right way, and also going and getting the materials and coming back.
Right. Right. And I just want to say one other thing. This has to do with husbands with wives, and or maybe wives with husbands. Whoever's doing the project, one needs to be very clear in the communications that this simple little project you're talking about is going to take much longer than you think, right? Do you agree with that, John?
A lot of times that is true. That is true. I mean, I just experienced it. It wasn't my issues, but You have to be together on some of these projects.
Yeah, I mean, we've all experienced it, right? I mean, it's as simple things. So, we need to clean the cars. Well, okay, so what's involved in cleaning the cars? I've got to get the hose out. I've got to get the washer for the brush, the this, the that. Next thing you know, it's 2 hours, and they're like, "Well, what took you so long? Did you help?"
Right.
Right. Anyway, I digress. All right, folks, we appreciate you listening to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email at questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. Go to our website and leave us a message. We've actually got a voice pipe thing where if you click up on the upper right-hand thing, you can leave us a voice message. We would really like to do that. John, we are running that contest from now till July 1st, $25 for your uses for blue tape online. So if we come up, we're trying to find as many uses besides for painting for blue tape as possible. I saw a really good one the other day that I'm not going to put out there on the air, but anyway, I saw another one. And you can join our Facebook group too. That's Facebook at Handyman Pro or Handyman Pros. Yeah, it's at Handyman Pros. Boy, I should know my own stuff, right? So, John, I don't know what's happening, man. I think I see. Are there lights in the sky tonight? Is that what I saw?
That's right. It looks like it's a spaceship, Larry.
I think it's landing. I have my toolkit. I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's get that thing taken apart.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.